The term God mode and Led Zeppelin have never been used ever so eloquently. Hey everyone, David here. So this review might be a little bit late, just a little bit. I'm still hoping for it to be up at a good time. But finally, Thor Ragnarok, one of the most anticipated movies of the year, primarily because of the brand new angle and approach that they're taking with not just a Marvel movie, but also a Thor movie. And this one had a lot of expectations to meet. Because for one, you're throwing in Hulk, you're throwing in Hela, you're throwing in all these different things that are very new to not only, again, a Marvel movie, but also the Thor franchise, where you're mixing in elements from the old classic Jack Kirby comics and all this stuff. But also, nobody really has a humongous affinity for Thor when it comes to his own standalone films. In fact, more often than not, Thor: The Dark World is referred to as probably being the worst Marvel movie. And that's not to say that it's like a total piece of shit or anything, but it's like, it just does not measure to even Iron Man 3 or something like that. But of course, all those rankings aside that could be easily debated, Thor Ragnarok had an awful lot to live up to. And the story is one of the reasons for why so many people were excited. You got Thor being banished from Asgard by Hela, and so he finds himself in not only a different planet, but possibly a different dimension where everything just looks really weird. However, one interesting little thing. Actually, there's a number of interesting things about this planet, from the Grandmaster to Valkyrie to things coming, just surprising him left and right. One of the biggest surprises of them all is the fact that he can get his hair cut. Oh my god! But nothing tops the inclusion of the Incredible Hulk, played once again here by Mark Ruffalo. And so now it's not only their mission to form a team that will then be able to break out from this planet and from the clutches of the Grandmaster, but also to take the fight to Hela to take back Asgard. It was after Civil War where Kevin Feige and the rest of Marvel probably learned that there's a formula to be had here when it comes to the quote-unquote standalone films. The standalone films of characters that they've never done before, Doctor Strange, Black Panther, and the MCU's own version of Spider-Man, they work because it feels somewhat fresh. With these sequels that are technically standalone films, we've gotten to the point where I'm gonna make it sound like we're super spoiled and we're super just over advantaged, and just like we've been handed and spoon-fed so much when it comes to these characters uniting and being part of the shared universe, that when we get a standalone film, we're just kind of like or when we get an end credit scene that just doesn't live up to expectations because we're expecting just something so grandiose, it's like, oh, you know, the end credit scene could have been better. But I'm like, I'm trying to retain some self-awareness here, noticing that, yeah, we've become spoiled. So Marvel has adapted to that by not only having the third Captain America movie be pretty much Avengers 2.5, but now Thor Ragnarok includes all these different elements, and one of the biggest elements is the inclusion of the Incredible Hulk, taking some inspiration from Planet Hulk, with him not only having this gladiator outfit but also being the top champion at this planet where he's idolized. There's like parades, there's like posters of the Hulk or whatever. He's a fucking superstar on this planet. So Thor being dethroned not only from Asgard, but from also the reputation that he would normally have as that kind of superstar, it makes for a very wonderful dynamic and cool chemistry between not just Mark Ruffalo and Chris Hemsworth as those characters, but I dare say Thor and a CG Hulk. CG Hulk in this movie steals some of the scenes that he's in, and I think his work with Thor and every scene that they shared is probably the biggest highlight of the film. That's not to say that the rest of the film has some great things about it, because one of the things that I can really praise the film is that it never felt like a recycled thing that Marvel has done. As much as I like Doctor Strange, there's so many arguments to be made about that film feeling almost like Iron Man all over again. From the arrogant hero going through this physical and metaphysical change and learning the error of his ways and becoming the better person that he was before. You could argue that maybe that happens with Thor, but he learned something a little bit different about himself. He went through that arrogance phase in that first movie, which is where that comparison can maybe be drawn in. But here, throwing in not only the inclusion of Hulk and how he needs Hulk, but he also needs all these other people. It's like him realizing that, okay, I need a team, but they never go the full mile where it's like, oh, that's the main theme about the story, because you've seen that theme before. So it's more about taking it easy and just having a good time. That's where the movie's prime focus is. And as soon as the movie starts and you get a feeling for the humor, I get the feeling that I think the humor is going to be the biggest dividend here amongst people, because I've seen some people on Facebook saying that it was cringe-inducing, whereas other people, including the crowd that I was seeing the movie with, were loving it. And I was laughing right there with them, but I will admit there's moments here and there that didn't bother me, but it was just a little obvious that they were ad-libbing. Like, they were coming up with their own stuff and they're just running through it. And if that was cut out, the movie probably would have been a little shorter, because they would have stuck more with what the script was. And so it was a little obvious for me. It didn't the actual humor that they were coming up with wasn't bothering me. There were some good lines here and there thrown in by Mark Ruffalo, Chris Hemsworth. Even Cate Blanchett has her moments of ad-libbing where I'm like, okay, that was kind of funny. I enjoyed that. It's just that it was ad-libbing, and it was noticeable to me. So it's like the seams showing a little bit. If you're a very good comedic actor or actress, you're able to kind of blend it all together to where it all feels seamless. It all feels like one big thing, rather than, oh, here's where the script was and then here's where the ad-libbing was. And there was a little bit of separation within the humor, but the humor was definitely a focus by director Taika Waititi and the rest of the crew behind the writing and the cast, especially from the moments that this movie opens up with Thor down in the underworld and then moving on from point A to point B with inclusions of characters that you didn't think were going to be in the movie, but in case you do already know, I'm not going to mention them. You probably already know who they are, but for the sake of people who probably don't watch as many trailers, I'm going to keep that a secret. Though I have to admit that jumping from point A to point B, especially during the first act or so, did feel slightly jarring. It wasn't the worst thing imaginable, but it did make me think that Thor Ragnarok, in a perfect world, in an alternate universe, Thor Ragnarok probably would have been fucking perfect as a 10-episode or maybe even an 8-episode miniseries on Netflix or on something like that, or on some kind of premium format, with the level of budget, but at the same time the pacing where each episode could be dedicated to some of the places that they were there at the beginning, during the first 30 minutes. It would have been awesome. It really would have been awesome. It would have felt like those cartoons, but I mean that in a good way, where you got the art style to match with the Jack Kirby stuff, as well as the 80s buddy cop movie vibe that the director always intended for this movie to have from the beginning. He would often say in the interviews that he was going for a buddy cop. You definitely feel that for the movie from the humor and the writing and the way that the chemistry all flows together, but I do think that the pacing could have been slightly better if it was a miniseries, but that's just wishful thinking on my part. The only thing that I'm a little worried about, because as an isolated single event type of movie, the movie really is unique in its pattern, and it's very entertaining and very fun, and its sole mission is to have a fun time, while at the same time not necessarily setting up certain points about the MCU. Yes, there's references to the Infinity Stones and stuff like that, but its focus is never on that. It's on having a good time, of having Thor with this team that involves Incredible Hulk going on this ride, and it succeeds at that. The only thing that I'm worried about is that because of the ad-libbing and the level of humor, I do feel like the Thor we get in this film is quite a different Thor from the previous versions that we've seen from the first two Thor movies, or his inclusion in any of the Avengers movies. So if we go to Infinity War and then all of a sudden he's very dead on serious, going from Thor Ragnarok to where he's, popping jokes from the very get-go of the opening sequence that are very much like Seth Rogen, Jay Baruchel's Jonah Hill type humor because of the ad-libbing, going from that to something that's ultimately going to be much more, I guess you could say, Shakespearean, because this is Thor that we're talking about in like Avengers Infinity War, it's going to be a little strange and off-putting for all of us who have been like paying attention at this point. Oh yeah, and it's Marvel, so yeah, the villain is a little lackluster. And I mean that mainly in the screen time, because Cate Blanchett really did a good job. She was better than Malekith. She was better than some of the villains that we criticized up until this point, like Ronan the Accuser. In fact, she kind of reminded me an awful lot of a villain that we saw earlier this year in another MCU property, Spider-Man, with Michael Keaton as the Vulture, where he was good personality, but he had a very decent amount of screen time in that movie where he was awesome and he felt like he belonged. Here, Hela, played by Cate Blanchett, she's a very good villain. She's got some great powers, and she's got this personality to it that felt a little bit unique and much more lifelike. So I'm like, okay, cool. I just wish you got more than 10 minutes of screen time, because after a while, the movie kind of drops her to where ever so often it's like the movie's like, oh yeah, we have to go check on her. What's she doing? Oh yeah, she's sitting. Okay, now let's go back to Planet Hulk. I'm like, dealing with Grandmaster. And I'm like, is there a way that we can maybe bring these two worlds together and maybe make it work, because at this point one does feel a little disjointed from the other. It's like the movie really wanted to dedicate all of its time to Planet Hulk, but we still need a Asgard to worry about because Asgard's the one that's in peril, so we have to include him. But I'm like, at that point, I guess, something should have been done about Asgard earlier in the movie. That's all I'm going to say. Still, that didn't detract from the fun that I had, because that was the focus of the movie and it exceeded at that. And I think that at this point we should try our best to not look at these movies under a microscope, because as much as we would love to see like the next evolution of where they can take with these Avengers movies or these MCU movies, being like, oh, look at this, look at that, look at this, I think at this point we need to take them at face value for what the director's intending, which is to try to bring their voice and their interpretation to the project. And that's what I kind of looked for in Thor Ragnarok, and I saw that coming in spades from Taika Waititi of what he intended for the film to be, and I think he did a good job at that. So I'm going to be giving Thor Ragnarok a very high 8 out of 10. And with that whole thing said about the director bringing their voice to the project, it makes me all the more anticipated to see what Ryan Coogler has in store for Black Panther. Because I'm expecting a similar thing where, yeah, we're not going to get the biggest ties to the MCU or anything like that, but I really want to see or feel something unique about that film that I know I'm not going to get in another Thor film or another Captain America film. So Thor Ragnarok, if you have seen the film, please let me know in the comments below what you thought of the film. Do you think it was a letdown, or do you think that it exceeded your expectations? It was perfect. It was everything that you wanted. And what do you look forward to going from this point on into the MCU, especially after those end credit scenes, which one of them might explain why we see certain things in that leaked trailer if you did kind of cheat and gave into the urge to check out that leaked Avengers Infinity War trailer like I did. I will now beat myself with this USB cable. Don't forget to like and share this video to support it, and of course support the channel by hitting the subscribe button down below. Until next time, guys, see you all later. And I can't get it out of my iPod either. It's on my iPod. I'm not kidding. My girlfriend caught me listening to it one time. She considered breaking up with me.